It's not the first time I've sat in my own kitchen and felt like a stranger. I stir instant coffee in my old chipped mug, the one Eleanor gave me on our 10th anniversary. In the living room, Percy's watching the morning news. The TV's turned up just enough to remind me he's there. From the hallway, Laura hums something as she gets ready in the bathroom. This house used to be mine. Now it's just a stage set where I play the role of the old man who lives here. My name is Mortimer Sloan, 67, retired safety inspector, widower, and for all practical purposes, a ghost in the home I built with my own 2 hands. It was supposed to be our forever place. For Eleanor, for Lavra, for the life we built. Now, 8 years after Eleanor passed from pancreatic cancer, this house feels like it belongs to someone else. Dad, are you drinking that awful instant coffee again? Lavra sweeps into the kitchen in her silk robe. Percy made fresh coffee in the machine. I'm used to this, I mumble, not looking up. She shrugs and pours herself a cup from the sleek espresso maker they installed where my old toaster used to sit. After Eleanor's funeral, Lavra and Percy came down from Chicago. Just for a couple of weeks to help you adjust, she said. That couple of weeks stretched into 8 years. At first, I was grateful. Grief is loud in an empty house, and Lavra filled it with the soft hum of home again, dinners, laundry, warmth. Percy wasn't so bad then. We'd share a whiskey now and then, but little things began to shift. They moved from the guest room into my bedroom. Said it was more spacious. Then Percy needed a home office, so my study, the one with my tools and documents, became his. My basement workshop turned into a gym. Laura's childhood room became a walk-in closet, and I got the old storage room refitted into a 9-square-meter bedroom. The last private corner I had. Good morning, Mort, Percy says, clapping me on the shoulder. I flinch. No one calls me Mort, only Eleanor ever did. I've always been Mortimer to the rest of the world. We're having dinner with the Carmichaels. Tonight, Lavra announces, scrolling on her phone. 7 o'clock, and please wear something decent this time. Last time, I wore the sweater Eleanor gave me for our final Christmas. Apparently, that wasn't good enough. When they leave the kitchen, I pull a notebook from my robe pocket. My quiet ledger. A list of little humiliations, not out of spite, just to prove I'm not imagining it. Entry. No notice of guests. Eleanor's sweater is not decent. I was a health and safety inspector for 18 years. My job was spotting the invisible cracks, weak points, things that would collapse if ignored. Now I document the collapse of my own space, my own presence. Later that morning, Laura pokes her head in. Dad, I'm going to the supermarket. Need anything? No, thank you. You sure? I can get those galettes you like. I nod. These sudden offers usually mean something's coming. Sure enough, she sits down. Percy and I wanted to talk to you about renovations. We're thinking of turning your old library into a nursery. A nursery? I ask, my voice catching. Are you? Oh no, she laughs. Not yet. But we need to plan ahead. That room's just collecting dust. Collecting dust? That library holds a lifetime of railroad history books I read to her every night when she was little. But I only nod. I understand. Notebook entry. Library soon to be nursery. The day drags. I tinker in the garage, my last refuge. Percy never enters. Too dirty, he says. That night, the Carmichaels arrive loud, dressed for an event. Realtors and beauty salons. Bahamas and renovations. Mr. Sloan, what did you do before retirement? She asks, polite curiosity. I was a health and safety inspector. Oh. She doesn't know what to say next. Incredibly boring work. Percy chuckles. Mort used to go on for hours about fire codes and loose bolts. Real party killer. Everyone laughs. I smile. I know how to disappear in a room after dinner as I clear plates. I overhear them. James says he can get me a promotion by year's end, Percy says. Then we can start the rest of the renovations. Did you talk to him about the workshop? He adds, not yet. One thing at a time. Notebook entry. They want the workshop. Soon, nothing of mine will be left. I retire early. In my tiny room, I pull out a photo of Eleanor taken on our 20th anniversary. She's laughing, wind in her hair. What would you do, Ellie? I whisper. I can almost hear her voice. Don't let people overreach, Mortimer, even if they're family. For the first time in years, I feel something stir. Not grief. Not resignation. Something colder, sharper, a decision, notebook entry. It's time for a change. The next morning, clouds hang low, promising rain. I sit in my old Buick 15 years old and mocked by Percy. But today, this car is my key, too. Freedom. I drive 20 minutes to a real estate agency, one that isn't Homestead Realty, where Percy works. No chance of word leaking out. Inside, a young woman greets me with a warm smile. Her name tag reads, Audrey Page, Senior Consultant. What can I do for you? She asks, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I take a breath. It's the first time I've ever said it out loud. I'd like to inquire about the possibility of selling my house. Sure, Mr. Sloan. Mortimer Sloan. She opened her laptop. Tell me about your property, Mr. Sloan. I described the house. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage, 20 acres. It was built in the 80s, renovated 15 years ago. Sounds very attractive. Audrey nodded. What neighborhood in Fort Smith is it in? West Hills. Her eyes widened visibly. West Hills was one of the most upscale neighborhoods in the city. Not luxurious, but definitely upper middle class. If it's no secret, why did you decide to sell? I was prepared for that question, but I still faltered. The house was too big for me alone. I lied. I'd been widowed a few years ago. That was a half-truth. I was widowed, but I wasn't living alone. I'm sorry for your loss, she said automatically. Have you looked for a new place to live? Not yet. I wanted to see how much I could get for the house. Audrey made a note in her notebook. Would you like me to arrange an appraisal? Yes, but I lowered my voice. Can I do it in confidence? You see, my daughter and her husband are living with me now, and I'm not ready to discuss the subject with them yet. Audrey frowned, but quickly returned a professional smile. Of course, Mr. Sloan. We can do a preliminary appraisal based on market data, and for a detailed inspection, choose a time when your relatives won't be home. I nodded with relief. That will be perfect. After an hour of discussing the details, I left the office with Audrey's business card and an appointment for a preliminary home appraisal the following Tuesday. Laura and Percy were always gone all day on Tuesdays. She to work for the insurance company, he to the properties. Sitting in the car, I scrutinized the business card, feeling a mixture of dread and excitement. Was I really going to Dothis? Sell. A house full of memories? My gaze fell to the rear view mirror where a small picture of Eleanor hung. I'm sorry, Ellie, I whispered, but I can't live like this anymore. The next few days passed in a strange state of bifurcation. Outwardly, I continued my usual behavior, breakfasting to Percy's disparaging comments, listening to Laura's instructions, trying to be inconspicuous. But inside, something had changed. There was a purpose, a plan. It gave me strength. On Tuesday, right after Laura and Percy left, Audrey arrived with the appraiser, an older man with a clipboard and a laser rangefinder. They carefully inspected every corner of the house, taking notes and photographs. Excellent condition, Mr. Sloan, the appraiser said, walking around the living room. You've taken good care of the house. Thank you, I replied, feeling unexpectedly proud. When the inspection was over, we sat down in the kitchen. The appraiser was quickly calculating something on a clipboard. Given the condition of the house, the neighborhood, and the current market situation, he began. I'd value your property at about $700,000. I froze. The amount was considerabler than I'd expected. That's a serious figure, I finally squeezed out. The Fort Smith market is booming, Audrey explained. Plus, houses in the West Hills are always in the market. You've got a great lot, a nice layout. I think we can find a buyer pretty quickly. So, what's next? I asked. If you're ready to move forward, we'll sign an exclusive representation agreement. Take professional photos, place an ad, and everyone will know the house is for sale. I finished for her. Yes, Audrey nodded. That's the point. The more potential buyers see the ad, the faster we'll find the right one, I wondered. The moment of truth had come sooner than I'd expected. Either I back off now or I make a decisive move. Before we place the public listing, I said slowly, is there any way we can show the house to a few verified clients and in confidence? The appraiser and Audrey looked at each other. There is a practice of showing to prospective buyers in advance, Audrey said cautiously, but you still have to sign a contract. I understand. I nodded. Let's do that. We spent the next 2 hours discussing details and filling out paperwork. When they left, I sat in the kitchen looking at a copy of the signet contract. The first step had been taken. In the evening, when Laura and Percy returned, I behaved as usual. I ate dinner with them, listened to their stories about the day's work, nodded in the right places. But inside, I was seething with a strange excitement. I sprang into action for the first time in years. 3 days later, Audrey called. Mr. Sloan, I have potential buyers who are very interested in your house based on the preliminary description. A married couple. Both work at the medical center. They'd like to see the house as soon as possible. When? I asked frantically, to figure out how to organize the showing without Laura and Percy finding out. They could drive up this Saturday around 11 in the morning. Would that suit you? I remembered what Laura had said about weekend plans. Something to do with visiting a winery outside of town with the Carmichaels. Yes, Saturday works for me, I answered. 11 o'clock Saturday morning, Laura and Percy left early, just as they had planned. I tidied the house quickly, though I didn't need to. Laura always kept it in perfect order. At 10:55, Audrey's car stopped at the gate. With her were Twelman and a middle-aged woman, elegantly dressed. Dr. and Mrs. Hampton. Audrey introducing them. This is Mr. Sloan, the owner of the house. The show went smoothly. The Hamptons asked questions about the heating system, the age of the roof, the quality of the plumbing. They toured every room, including my small pantry bedroom, which I introduced as extra storage space. It's a beautiful house, Mr. Sloan, Mrs. Hampton said when we returned to the living room. You could sense that a happy family had lived here. The words suddenly hurt me. Yes, there had been a happy family here once upon a time. Thank you, I said discreetly. We need to discuss some details, Dr. Hampton said, turning to Audrey. But in general, we like the house very much. After they left, I sat in the chair for a long time, looking at pictures on the mantelpiece. Eleanor and I in front of our newly built house. Laura at her high school graduation. Our last family vacation to the lakes a year before Eleanor's illness. What am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Selling a house that holds so many memories? That evening, when Laura and Percy returned full of excitement from their trip, I almost decided to abandon my plan. But then something happened that finally strengthened my resolve. Dad, we talked to Percy about something, Laura said as we sat in the living room after dinner. Do you remember when we talked about Therinovations? Yes, I answered cautiously. We decided to start next month. Percy got a nice bonus at work, and we can afford not only to remodel the library, but also to update Thefficade. The front, I questioned. Why? It's in perfect condition. Dad. Laura rolled her eyes like she used to do when she was a teenager. This style was outdated 20 years ago. We want something more modern. It's my house, I said quietly. I like the way it looks. Percy and Laura looked at each other with that peculiar expression I knew so well, a mixture of condescension and irritation. Of course, Mort, Percy said. But you realize this house will go to Laura someday. We're just thinking of the future. Someday, I repeated, but not now. Nobody's saying now, Dad, Laura interjected. But you don't mind if we modernize the house a little, do you? After all, we live here, temporary. I wanted to shout. You've been living here temporarily for 8 years, but I remained silent as always. I nodded in agreement, and inwardly, I was convinced I was doing the right thing. The next day, Audrey called with the news that solved everything. Mr. Sloane, I have great news. The Hamptons are ready to propose. $690,000 with minimum conditions. They really want this house. I was sitting in my car in a supermarket parking lot where I'd gone to get groceries so I could talk on the phone. That's a very good offer, I said. One of the best I've seen. In a while, Audrey confirmed. They can put down a deposit as early as this week and want to finalize the deal as soon as possible. Do you need time to think about it? I closed my eyes, imagining how my life would change. A new place to live, a fresh start. No more constant humiliation, no more feeling like a stranger in my own home. No, I answered firmly. I accept the offer. When can we sign the papers? That's wonderful, Audrey exclaimed. Let's meet tomorrow at your office. Say at 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock, I confirmed. Putting down the phone, I sat motionless for a few minutes. A strange feeling came over me, a mixture of regret, fear, and relief. The house that Eleanor and I had turned it into a family nest would soon belong to other people. But maybe it's the right thing to do. Maybe that's the way it's told be. Houses, like people, have to move on. The next day, I signed all the necessary paperwork. The deal was finalized with the condition of closing in 2 weeks. The Hamptons had put down a sizable deposit and had already started the mortgage process. You'll need to vacate the house by the 25th, Audrey said as she handed me copies of the paperwork. That gives you about 2.5 weeks. That's enough, I nodded, even though I had no idea where I'd be moving to. That was the second part of my plan, which I hadn't thought through yet. Mr. Sloane. Audrey looked at me with slight concern. When do you plan to tell your family about the sale? I sighed. Here it was the hardest question of all. This week, I said. When I find the right moment. She nodded, but I could tell by the look in her eyes that she didn't approve of my approach. Well, she didn't know the whole story. Returning home, I felt a strange calmness. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. Now there was only one thing to do. Find a new place to live and prepare for the inevitable storm that would erupt when Laura and Percy found out the house had been sold. I stopped at the small cafe where Eleanor and I often ate breakfast on weekends and ordered a cup of coffee. I took an old photograph out of my wallet and stared at my wife's smiling face for a long time. I did it, Ellie, it whispered. I hope you'd understand. I woke up with a firm decision. Today, I would tell them the truth. The 2 weeks of silence after signing the papers had drained my nerves. Every day, looking at Laura and Percy's carefree faces, making plans for the future in a house that no longer belonged to them. I felt like a fraud, but tonight would be the end of all that. I chose Friday night for Arieson. Lavra always cooked family dinner on Fridays, a tradition she'd inherited from Eleanor. Only Eleanor cooked herself, and Lavra usually ordered food from a restaurant. The day dragged agonizingly slow. I spent the morning looking at apartment listings on the internet. I found several options near the city center, small but casa studio apartments, quite suitable for a lonely pensioner. I even called one-off ads and agreed to view it the next day. Toward evening, Percy came home in high spirits. "Great news, Mort," he announced as soon as he stepped through the door. "James has officially approved me promotion. As of the 1st of the month, I'll be a senior appraiser." "Congratulations," I said, trying to sound sincere. "Now we'll definitely be able to start renovations next month." He rubbed his hands together. Laura had already contacted the designer. I didn't say anything. In 3 days, they wouldn't be looking for a designer, but for a new place to live. Laura arrived a little later, laden with packages from the Italian restaurant. "Dad, can you help set the table?" she asked, unpacking the containers of food. "We're having a special dinner tonight." "Did Percy tell you about the promotion?" "Yes, he mentioned it." "Isn't that great?" She smiled. That special smile she had when money or status was involved. "No can finally do the house properly." "Not our house," I thought as I set the plates down. Dinner began as usual. Percy talked at length about his accomplishments at work, Laura listening admiringly to every word. I chewed mechanically on the lasagna, which seemed tasteless, and waited for the right moment. James also hinted that I could be a department head in a year or two. Percy raised his wine glass. "Here's to a successful future." Lavra clinketed her glass with his, and I joined in a little too late. "By the way, Dad," Lavra turned to me while we're on the subject of finances, "I wanted to discuss the mortgage issue with you." I tensed. It was the first time in a long time she'd spoken directly about it. "What was it?" I asked cautiously. "Well, you realize it's illogical to keep paying the mortgage at your age." She sipped her wine. "You're almost 70. It's just wasted money." "What do you suggest?" My voice sounded strained. "Percy and I think it would make sense to pay the rest of the money off at once," she said as if she were explaining something to Ackald. "You have savings, don't you? We could use them and we could pay you back gradually." I put my fork down. They didn't know or pretended not to know that the mortgage had been paid in full 5 years ago. Eleanor and I made the last payment just before she got sick. "And why would we do that?" I asked, feeling the anger building up inside me. "Dad," Lavra rolled her eyes, "it's obvious. The house will be all ours. No debts. I'll inherit it someday anyway, so why not settle the matter now?" "Ours?" I repeated, emphasizing the word. "Well, technically yours, of course," she corrected, "but you know what I mean." "I do." I nodded. "You want me to give up my life savings to pay off a non-existent mortgage, all so that the house will be all yours?" Lavra frowned. "What do you mean non-existent?" "That's what it means. Your mom and I paid off the mortgage in full 5 years ago." There was silence. Laura and Percy looked at each other. "Then why are you still making monthly payments to the bank?" Lavra asked. "That was it. They've been watching my finances." "They're not mortgage payments," I said calmly. "They're contributions to my retirement account, which, by the way, is for my old age, not for your renovations." Lavra blushed, either from embarrassment or anger. "You've been lying to us all this time." Her voice rose. "Pay off the mortgage if it's already paid off. Why did you have to hide it?" It was so absurd that I couldn't hold back a chuckle. "Why should I have reported it? To make you think the house was yours even sooner? Well, you know." Laura thumped her palm on the table. "We've been living here for 8 years, taking care of you, keeping the house in perfect condition, and instead of gratitude, we get take care of me." Interrupted. "You push me into a closet." You treat my house like an owner. You plan renovations without my consent, and that's what you call taking care of me. Percy tried to defuse the situation. Mort, let's not. No, let's not. I straightened in my chair. Let's get this straight. You came here temporarily to support me after Eleanor's death, and you stayed for 8 years. Gradually, Yao took over the house, pushing me into the furthest corner. And now you have the nerve to demand that I pay the mortgage. Lavra looked stunned by my sudden statement. In all these years, I had never once raised my voice or expressed my displeasure. Daddy, you're not being fair, she said in a trembling voice. We always wanted what was best for you and for the house. For the house, maybe, he agreed, but not for me. That's not true, Laura raised her voice. We care for you. We put up with your oddities, your slovenliness, your stubbornness. We left our lives in Chicago to come here, and I'm grateful for the first few months, I replied. But then everything changed. You stopped seeing me as Apperson. I became a piece of furniture to be moved to a corner. Percy coughed out. Mort, I think. You're exaggerating. We've always treated you with respect. Have you? I looked him in the eye. Then why do you call me Mort even though you know I didn't like it? Why do you discuss me in the third person when I'm sitting next to you? Why do you make decisions about me house without my input? It's our house too, Laura exclaimed, pounding her fist on the table. We've invested 8 years of our lives in it. The moment had come. I took a deep breath. No, it's not your house. And in 3 days it won't be mine either. There was a ringing silence. Lavra and Percy stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. What? What do you mean? Lavra finally squeezed. Out. I sold house, I said simply. The deal closes in 3 days. The new owners move in a week. Percy laughed first, a nervous, uncertain laugh. Very funny, Mort. That's a good joke. It's not a joke. I pulled a folded piece of paper out of my shirt pocket, a copy of the sales contract, and put it on the table. Here's the paperwork. The house. Sold for $690,000 to the Hampton family. They're doctors. Very nice people. Lavra grabbed the paper with trembling hands. Quickly ran her eyes over the text. Her face palled. You can't, she whispered. You have no right. I have every right, I replied calmly. The house belongs to me and only to me. There are no encumbrances or co-owners in the deeds. But how could you? Lavra sounded genuinely shocked. Without a word, behind our backs. Did you ask my opinion when you were planning to remodel the library or changing the facade or taking one room after another? Percy finally realized that something serious was going on. He took the document from Laura's hands and scrutinized it with the professional eye of a real estate appraiser. It's a real contract, he murmured. And the price is very good. Percy. Lavra turned to her husband indignantly. Is that what you're worried about now? I'm just stating a fact. He shrugged, but he looked as if he'd been kicked in the butt. Daddy. Lavra turned to me again, her voice softening, almost pleading. You can't do this to us. This is our home. This is where I grew up. This is where Percy and I have lived for 8 years. You can find another place to live, I replied. Your wages are good, especially now with Percy's promotion. It's not about money, she exclaimed. It's about the fact that this is our home. You can't just throw us out on Fest Street. I'm not throwing you out on the street, I said calmly. You have 3 days to find a new place to live and another 4 days after that to move in. That's plenty of time. 7 days? Lavra laughed hysterically. Are you kidding me? Where are we going to find a place to live in 7 days? You could rent an apartment, I suggested. I found several good options, literally a couple hours of searching. And where will you move to? Percy asked, still holding the contract. I've already found an apartment near the center, I answered. I'm going to see it tomorrow. Laura looked as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Daddy. Her voice became soft, almost like when she was. Heckled and asked for something special. Let's talk about it. Surely, it's still possible to cancel the sale. We'll pay a penalty if we have to. The deal is closed, I said firmly. The money has already been transferred to my account, but what about? Mom? Laura suddenly exclaimed, tears glistening in her eyes. How can you sell the house where you were so happy? Where so many memories are stored. It was a low blow. I felt something clench inside, but I kept my outward composure. The memories will stay with me wherever I live, I answered. And your mom? She would have understood. She would never let herself be cornered, not even by her own daughter. Laura jumped up, knocking over a chair. Don't you dare use your mom, she shouted. You have no idea what she would say. She would never approve of what you're doing to us. Laura Persa put his hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her down. Let's discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss. She cut him off. He decided everything behind our backs. He just sold our house. Not yours, I corrected her calmly. Mine. You. Laura gasped with rage. You've always been so weak-willed. Your mother used to twist you around, and now you want to show character now when it could ruin our lives. I stared at her in silence, feeling neither anger nor resentment, just tiredness and a strange relief that at last all the cards were out. Laura Percy's voice became sudden libidinous-like. Perhaps we should accept the situation as it is. If the documents are signed and the money transferred, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to undo the deal. Whose side are you on? Laura turned to her husband. I'm just trying to think practically, he replied. We need to find a new place to live quickly. I can't believe this is happening. Laura shook her head. Daddy, you can't just throw us out. You and your husband need to know. I finally said the phrase I'd been rehearsing in me head for days, that the house has been sold. You're nobody here now. Laura and Percy turned pale, realizing the reality of my words and the firmness of my intentions. You have to vacate the house in 7 days, I added. I've already told the new owners that the house will be empty by then. You're going to regret this, Laura whispered. I swear you will. She ran out of the dining room, slamming the door loudly. Percy remained seated, still holding the contract in his hands. You know, Mort, he said after a long pause, I've always suspected that beneath that quiet exterior lurked something else. But I didn't think you were capable of such a drastic step. Life is full of surprises, I replied. Yeah, he grinned wryly. Well, I'm going to go comfort my wife, and I'll probably start looking for hotels around here. He got up and headed for the exit, but stopped in the doorway. You know what the ironic thing is? I even admire you a little bit right now. I didn't think you had the guts to do something like this. With those words, he walked out, leaving me alone at the table with the cold food and empty glasses. I got up slowly, collected fetishes, and took them to the kitchen. There were muffled voices coming from Laura and Percy's bedroom. They were arguing, discussing, probably already planning their next moves. I sat down on the bed in my room and let myself exhale for the first time all night. My hands trembled slightly. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me empty and slightly disoriented. I'd done it. After so many years of silent patience, I had finally taken control of my life. There was no triumph or gloating, only a quiet satisfaction at the justice that had been restored. Heavy footsteps came from the hallway, then the front door slammed. One of them, probably Percy, had come out of the house. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of an engine starting. I went to the window and saw their car pull out of the yard. Probably they went to look for a temporary place to live or just to get some air after the scandal. Returning to the bed, I pulled Eleanor's picture out from under the pillow. "I did it, Ellie," it whispered, running my finger over the glass of the frame. I finally got up from my knees. From the first floor came the sound of footsteps returning. Apparently, only one of them had left. The door downstairs slammed again, quieter this time. There was silence in the house. I lay on the bed without undressing and stared up at the ceiling. Strangely, despite the emotional strain off the evening, I felt unusually calm. It was as if the heavy weight I had been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. There were still many challenges ahead of me, moving, settling in, perhaps more conflicts with Laura and Percy, but the hardest part was over. I was no longer a prisoner in my own home. I was master of my life again. Muffled sounds came from the back of the house. Someone walking, moving things around. Were they making preparations for the inevitable move? Or was it just usual evening activity? I didn't know. And frankly, I wasn't too interested. At this point, tomorrow would be a new day, the first day of my new life. And right now I just wanted to enjoy the silence and that strange, almost forgotten feeling of freedom. The morning after the scandal began unusually quiet. Usually by 7 o'clock, Percy was rattling the dishes in the kitchen and Laura was humming something as she got ready for work. But today, there was a ringing silence in the house. I got out of bed, dressed, and stepped cautiously into the hallway. Laura and Percy's bedroom door was closed. Odd for this time of night. Going down to the kitchen, I found the coffee maker cold and the countertops perfectly clean without the usual morning mess. Perhaps they had left. No, their car was still parked in the driveway. I made myself some coffee and sat down at the table absent-mindedly, listening for the slightest sound in the house. About half an hour later, footsteps were heard on the stairs. Laura entered the kitchen already dressed for work, but with eyes swollen with tears and a pale face. "Good morning," I said, breaking silence. She gave me a cold look and silently walked toward the coffee maker. "I've already made coffee," I offered. "I prefer it fresh," she said. We sat in tense silence while she waited for the coffee to brew. Finally, Laura poured herself a cup and sat down across from me. "Is it true?" she asked quietly, looking into the cup, not at me. "Did you really sell the house?" "Yes," I answered. "All the papers are signed. The money has been transferred." She nodded, slowly as if digesting the information. "And there's no way to undo the sale?" "No." Her fingers clenched around the cup so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "You know," she began, her voice shaking with restrained. "I've been thinking all night trying to figure out why you did this, and the only explanation I can find is that you've gone mad with old age." "I'm perfectly sane, Laura." "Then it's just cruelty." She raised her round eyes to me. Deliberate, cold cruelty. "Have you always been like this, Papa? Or is it a new quality that has manifested itself since Mom's death?" Her words were calculated to hurt, and they accomplished their purpose. But I remained calm. "I don't think it's cruel to defend one's dignity," I answered. "You and Percy have treated me for years as a burden, as a ghost in your own house. What could I do?" "You could have." "Talk it to us," she exclaimed. "You could have said you were unhappy about something instead of pulling a stunt like that. It tried many times, but you wouldn't listen." "That's not true." She banged her cup on the table. "You never said anything." "Always just nodded and agreed." I sighed. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been silent for too long, holding grudges instead of confronting them openly. But it was too late to regret it now. "Anyway, it's done," I said. "You need to find a new place to live." Laura finished her coffee in one gulp and stood up abruptly. "I'm late for work," she said, heading for the exit. She stopped at the door and turned around. "Don't think this is the end, Dad. We'll talk again." After she left, I sat at the table. for a long time, replaying our conversation. There was something new about it. The first time in a long time, Laura had spoken to me as an equal, not as a helpless old man. Even her anger was an acknowledgement of my strength, my ability to make decisions. Percy came back for lunch. He looked tired and shaken as if he'd been up all night. When he saw me in the living room, he nodded and headed upstairs without a word. After a while, I heard the sounds of furniture being moved and drawers being opened, and it sounded like he was packing. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the phone rang. It was Audrey Myraltor, Mr. Sloane. Her voice sounded worried. Your daughter came to our office. She was very upset, demanding that we cancel the deal. And what did you tell her? I asked, feeling my stomach clench. That it was impossible. Of course, the papers are signed. The money has been transferred. The Hamptons have already put a deposit down on their current property. The chain can't be broken. How did she react? She threatened a lawsuit, said you were incapacitated, and as your daughter, she had the right to challenge the deal. I closed my eyes. It was to be expected. Don't worry, I said. She has no basis for such a claim. I had a medical checkup last month and I'm fully fit and healthy. That's what I told her, Audrey sighed. But she was very determined. You might want to be prepared for her to try to challenge the deal in court. Thanks for the warning, I said. I'll look into it. As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of irritation. Would Lavra really go that far to declare her own father incapacitated for the sake of the house? I went up to my room and pulled an old photo album out of my nightstand drawer. On the first page was Lavra at the age of 2, with a huge bow in her hair and a serious expression on her face. Next to her is me, young and smiling, holding her little hand. Eleanor took this picture in our first home before we moved to Fort Smith. As I turned the pages, I watched my daughter grow up. Here she is going to first grade. Haresh is receiving an award at the school science fair. Here is her high school graduation. In all the pictures, she's smiling, often next to me or Eleanor, sometimes both. When exactly did everything change? When did a loving daughter turn into a cold, calculating woman willing to declare her father incapacitated for the sake of an inheritance? Maybe it all started when she left for college. Eleanor often said that Lavra had become distant from us. Too quickly, hardly ever calling, rarely coming to visit on weekends. I defended my daughter at the time. She's building her life. That's normal. Or maybe the turning point was her marriage. Percy always struck me as a bit arrogant, too concerned with status and material possessions. Perhaps he influenced Lavra, changed her priorities. No. If I was honest with myself, I had to admit that the seeds had been sown much earlier. Eleanor and I had spoiled Laura too much, rarely denied her anything, always giving in to arguments. Laura is our treasure, Eleanor often said, and I agreed. We had created Ackles who was used to getting everything she wanted. The sound of a slamming door brought me back to reality. I put the album away and went downstairs. Percy was standing in the hallway with the car keys in his hands. On my way to see the apartment, he informed me dryly. Lavra will join me there after work. Did you find anything suitable? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. We'll see, he shrugged. Nothing comparable to this house, of course. I'm sorry, I said, though I didn't really feel sorry. Percy gave me a long look. You know, Mort, he said thoughtfully, I always thought you were a soft, even weak man. I am glad to be wrong. With these words, he went out, leaving me somewhat confused. Was this a peculiar expression of respect, or just anathurval barb? I spent the rest of the day sorting through my things and planning my move. I had an apartment viewing tomorrow, and I wanted to have a clear idea of what I would take with me and what I would leave behind. Lavra came back late, around 9 o'clock in the evening. I heard her enter the house, throw her keys on the console in the hallway with more force than usual, and go upstairs without looking in the living room where I was reading. After a while, she came downstairs and, to my surprise, headed straight for me. Her face looked different, not angry or annoyed, but somehow soft, almost vulnerable. "Daddy," she began quietly, sitting down in the chair across from me, "I want Tadek." I put the book aside and nodded, preparing myself for another round of accusations. "I've been thinking a lot today," she continued, looking into my eyes, a Buddhist. "About Mom, about how things have changed over the years." "And what conclusions did you come to?" I asked cautiously. "That perhaps Percy and I really didn't always treat you with the respect you deserve," she said with a visible effort. "We've been so busy with our own affairs, our own plans, that we forgot how you felt." I was silent, not knowing how to react to this unexpected admission. "And I want to fix that, Daddy?" Her voice softened. "Maybe we could start over. Forget the old hurts. What do you suggest?" I asked, still wary. "Well, for one," she smiled slightly, "you could call off the sale off the house. I know the deal is officially finalized, but you could find a way. And Percy and I promise that things will change. You'll be a full-fledged master in the house. We'll stop making decisions without you. We'll give you your room back. Oh, that's it." I felt a wave of disappointment rising inside. Not remorse, not realization of mistakes, just another attempt at manipulation. "Lavra," I said, trying to speak softly, "the house is sold. It's a fact. And even if it were possible to cancel the deal, I wouldn't do it." Her face changed instantly, the mask of friendliness falling away. "Why?" The harshness in her voice returned. "Can't you see that I'm trying to make things right?" "I see that you're trying to keep the house," I replied. "Not the relationship with me, but the house." "That's not true," she raised her voice. "I'm truly sorry for the way we treated you." "Perhaps," he agreed. "But your first and foremost suggestion is to cancel the sale of the house. Not let's see each other more often, not let's live separately, but maintain a good relationship. Just cancel the sale." Lara stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You're just a vindictive old man," she hissed. "You're punishing us for trying to help you." "I'm not punishing you, Lavra. I just want to live my life and my space with dignity." "Oh, now you're talking about dignity?" She laughed bitterly. "What about the dignity of your daughter who's going to be homeless in a week? You have a job. You have savings. If you have a husband with a good salary," I reminded her, "you're not going to end up on Fest Street." "It's not about money," she exclaimed. "It's about you destroying our family, our home. Family isn't about walls, Lavra. Family is about relationships. Respect, caring for each other." She looked at me as if I were speaking a language she didn't understand. "Well," she finally said, "now that you've made up your mind, all we have to do is accept it. But don't expect our relationship to stay the same." "They haven't been particularly warm in recent years," I said. "You're going to regret this, Dad," she said as headed for the exit. "I promise you'll regret it." When she left, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sad because I finally realized that my daughter was no longer the person I knew and loved. Relief because I had finally stopped lying to myself about our relationship. The next few days passed in a strange atmosphere of tense truce. Lavra and Percy were actively looking for a new place to live, spending most of their time away from home. When we ran into each other, the exchange of remarks was minimal and formal. I looked at an apartment I'd found through an ad, small but bright, in a good neighborhood, and immediately signed a lease. I liked everything: the location, the layout, the quiet neighbors. It was exactly what I was looking for, a place to start a new chapter of life. As I watched Laura and Percy, I noticed an interesting dynamic. It was as if they couldn't quite believe that the move was actually going to happen, despite actively for a place to live. Looking at apartments, they continued to act as if this was a temporary setback that was about to be resolved. We looked at a 2-bedroom apartment on Riverside, Percy said at dinner the 5th day after my announcement. It's not a bad place, but the rent's a steal. And then the boars are noisy, Lavra added. You can hear someone playing the piano. They talked about it as if they were discussing a theoretical possibility, not an immediate need. You realize you have to vacate the house in 2 days, don't you? I asked bluntly. They looked at each other. Yes, of course, Percy answered. We just want to find a really good place, not just grab the first place we can find. You don't have much time, I reminded them. We know, Dad, Lavra rolled her eyes. I don't need Tobe constantly reminded. Their behavior puzzled me. Did they still not believe that the situation was serious? Or were they just stalling for time, hoping for some kind of miracle? On the 6th day, when I returned home from a visit to the bank where I had opened a new account for the proceeds from the sale of the house, I found Lavra talking on the phone in the living room. She hadn't noticed my arrival, and I overheard part of the conversation. Yeah, my mom always said he might start having problems with his head as he got older, she said to someone. His father also suffered from dementia late in life. No, there's no official diagnosis. He refuses to be examined. Of course, it's not normal to sell the house without consulting the family. I froze in the doorway, stunned by what I was hearing. Lavra was spreading lies about my mental health and mentioning my father, who, by the way, never suffered from dementia. He died of a heart attack in his right mind. Lavra, I said loudly as I entered the room. She flinched and quickly ended the conversation. Daddy, I didn't hear you come in, she said, trying to hide her confusion. Obviously, I replied coldly. Who are you talking to? A friend. She looked away. Just discussing our business and my supposed dementia. She blushed but quickly pulled herself together. I'm worried about you, Dad. Your behavior lately has been atypical. My behavior is perfectly normal for someone who is tired of being neglected, I replied. And I had a full physical a month ago. All the results are normal, including cognitive function. Doctors can be wrong, she said stubbornly. And not all signs of dementia are visible on a routine exam. I shook my head, surprised at her insistence. Lavra, listen to me carefully. I'm completely sane. I haven't made a conscious decision to sell the house and start a new life, and nothing you try to portray me as incapacitate will change that fact. She looked at me with an expression that was hard to decipher, a mixture of disappointment, anger, and fear. Do you really believe you can live on your own? She said quietly. Without our help. I've lived 67 years, Lavra, I answered. The state of those years have been virtually under your control. Yes, I'm quite sure I can manage on my own. She looked at me for a long moment, then silently left the room. I heard her coming up the stairs, the bedroom door slamming. That evening, Percy returned, excited and with news. We found a house, he announced, coming into the kitchen where I was eating dinner. It's small, but it's in a good neighborhood. We can move in 3 days. Congratulations, I said sincerely. Renting? No, buying? He smiled with some pride. I had some savings, plus the bank had approved the mortgage. Not as big as this one, of course, but a corner of my own. That's great. News, I nodded. I'm glad you found the right place. Yeah. He paused, then added, You know, Mort, I'm beginning to think it's for the best. Maybe Lara and I should have been on our own a long time ago. His words surprised me. Of all possible reactions I had, least expected Percy to be so understanding. Did Lavra feel that way too? I asked cautiously. Not really, he sighed. It's hard for her to accept the change, but she'll get through it. I nodded, realizing that those words hid the complexity of their relationship. Anyway, Percy continued, we'll have the house vacated by the deadline. You don't have to worry. Thank you, I said. Percy nodded and walked out, leaving me pensive. Perhaps he had more sense than I'd realized. The next day, the last day for eviction, the atmosphere in the house became almost surreal. Lavra went from room to room, touching things, looking at pictures as if saying goodbye at every corner. Percy had organized the movers for tomorrow and was methodically packing their belongings. I was getting ready to move too, but I needed much less time. Most of my stuff was already sorted and packed. That evening, as I sat in the living room going over the final details of the contract with the Hamptons, Lavra came over and sat next to me. This is really happening, isn't it? She asked. Quietly, are we really leaving tomorrow? Yes, I confirmed. Tomorrow? She nodded, staring off into space. I still can't believe it, she said. All my life I've thought of this house as my home. I thought that one day it would be mine. And now you'll have a new home. I finished for her. Your own. It's not the same. She shook her head. Every corner here is connected to memories. Mom's here. Her voice shook and I saw tears glisten in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt a prick of regret. Not about selling the house that was the right decision, but that my relationship with my daughter had reached such an impasse. Lavra, I said softly. The memories will stay with you no matter where you live. But not the walls, she whispered. Not the room where I grew up. No, not the walls, he agreed, but maybe that's for the best. Sometimes you have to move forward. She didn't say anything, just sat there, absorbed in her thoughts. After a while, she got up and headed for the stairs. At the bottom, she stopped and turned around. Do you know what the strangest thing is, Daddy? She said with a bitter smile. Part of me still doesn't believe it's real. That tomorrow we're really leaving this place for good. With those words, she went upstairs, leaving me pensive. Even now? On the eve of FEMA, she couldn't or wouldn't fully accept the reality of the changes that had taken place. I looked around at the familiar walls, at the fireplace where the pictures of our family stood, at the armchair where Eleanor liked to sit. Tomorrow, all of this would no longer be mine. A new family will fill these rooms with their voices, their memories. Strangely, the thought didn't make me sad, just a quiet acceptance of the inevitable and a slight impatience for the new phase of life to begin. The day of the eviction started early. I woke up before dawn, lay in bed, and listened to the silence of the house, knowing that this was the last morning I would encounter here. It was a strange feeling, not exactly sadness, but a certain solemnity of the moment. Samedamir in the beginning of 7, footsteps were heard in the hallway. Then the muffled voices of Lavra and Percy. They too had risen early. Today was a big day for all of us. I got dressed and left the room. There were boxes of things already packed in the hallway. Percy had worked late last night. Going down to the kitchen, I found my daughter and son-in-law at the table. They were drinking coffee in tense silence. Good morning, I said, heading for the coffee maker. Morning, Percy said. Lara didn't say anything, just nodded. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. We ate breakfast in silence, broken occasionally by the clinking of cups against saucers. No one seemed to want to start a conversation, for fear that it would turn into another fight. The movers will be here at 10 o'clock, Percy said at last, glancing at his watch. We need to finish packing before they get here. I packed almost everything yesterday, I answered. All that's left is the personal effects and the bedding. Good, he nodded. We're almost done too. The kitchen utensils and some of the little things are left. Lavra was still silent, mechanically stirring the long-cooled coffee with a spoon. Lavra, I turned to her. Are you all right?" She looked up at me, her eyes red with dark circles under them. "No, Daddy, I'm not okay," she answered quietly. "I'm saying goodbye to the house where I spent my childhood. The house where I was happy. The house where the memories of my mom still live on." I sighed. I understood her feelings, but I couldn't tell myself to succumb to sentimentality. Not now. Memories of Mom will stay with you no matter where you live. I said they're not bound to. Wall's not easy for you to say, she snapped. You've made up your mind. You don't care. I do care, Lavra. I just made a choice that I think is right. A choice that destroyed our family. It wasn't the choice that destroyed our family, I said quietly. It was just a consequence. Percy coughed awkwardly. I think we should make the final preparations, Hesed, rising from the table. There isn't much time. Lavra got up too, giving Mina their long look, and followed her husband out of the kitchen. I was left alone, finishing my coffee and thinking about how strange it was that this stage of my life was ending, not with a loud scandal, but with a quiet supper sedricent. The next 2 hours passed in the bustle of last-minute packing. I packed fairest of my belongings, emptied my knit stands and closet. All my possessions fit into 4 medium-sized boxes and 1 suitcase, not much for someone who had lived in this house for almost 40 years. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. Movers had arrived. Percy met them and began to supervise its loading. They worked quickly and professionally, moving furniture and boxes of stuff out. I stood back watching the items familiar to the last scratch disappear into the back of the truck. The couch where Eleanor and I had watched the evening news. The chair where I read Little Lavra fairy tales. The table where she did her homework. All of these things that held our family's history were now leaving the house for good. Lavra went from room to room, checking to see if anything had been forgotten, but I could see her pause at each one as if mentally saying goodbye. At one point, she lingered in her former nursery, which had become a walk-in closet, and I noticed her furtively wiping away tears. By noon, most of the stuff had been moved out. The truck with Lara and Percy's possessions had left for their new home. My car was already loaded with my few belongings, ready to move into the new apartment. It was just the 3 of using a nearly empty house. It was a strange sensation to see bare walls, empty rooms where our footsteps echoed. The house seemed bigger and sadder without the furniture and things that gave it life. Well, said Percy, looking at his watch, I think we must be off. We should be at the new house when the movers arrive. Lavra nodded but didn't move. She stood in the middle of the living room staring at the walls, the ceiling, the empty corners. I'll be out in a minute, she said quietly. Percy nodded understandingly and went out, leaving the 2 of us alone. You know, Daddy, Lavra said without looking at me, I still can't believe it's over. That we're never coming back here again. There comes a time for everything, I replied. The house will live on just with different people. But why? She turned to me and I saw in her eyes not only tears but genuine comprehension. Why did you do that? Was it so unbearable to live with us? I sighed. Even now, in the last moments before parting, she couldn't or wouldn't understand. It's not about living together, Lavra. It's about respect. It's about attitude. You and Percy turned me into a ghost in my own home. I couldn't live like that any longer. We could have fixed it, she whispered. If you'd given us a chance, maybe, I agreed. But I decided to start a new life. And maybe it would. Do you some good too. She shook her head in disagreement, but didn't argue. Well, goodbye, Daddy, she said, heading for the exit. I hope you didn't regret your decision. Goodbye, Lavra, I replied, and I hope that someday you'll understand. She paused in the doorway as if she wanted to say something else, but changed her mind. She just nodded and walked out. I heard the engine of their car start, Thegravil crunching under their wheels as they drove out of the yard. and then there was silence. I was alone in the empty house. I walked through the rooms one last time, touching the walls, remembering the events that had happened here over the years. So much joy and sorrow, laughter and tears had seen these walls. In the bedroom we shared with Eleanor. I stopped at the window, looking out at the garden she loved so much. Mentally, I said goodbye to her, not for the first time in years, but perhaps most definitively. Goodbye, Ellie, I whispered. I hope you understand. I checked all the rooms from last time, made sure I hadn't forgotten anything, closed the windows, turned off the water and electricity, took the envelope with the keys, which you'll leave in the mailbox for the new owners. As agreed. At the front door, I turned around, glancing around the hallway. So many times I'd come in here on my way home from work and heard Eleanor's voice from the kitchen, seen little Laura running toward me. It was all just a memory now. I closed the door, dropped my keys in the mailbox, and walked to my car. Without looking back, I got behind the wheel and started the engine. It was time to move on. My new apartment was on the east side of town in a quiet neighborhood with neat apartment buildings and green courtyards. The 3-story red brick building looked solid and well-maintained. My apartment was on the second floor, a studio with a small kitchen and a balcony overlooking the park. I unloaded the carried boxes and a suitcase. The landlady, an elderly woman named Martha, met me with the keys and a brief briefing on the house rules. She seemed pleasant and unobtrusive, just the kind of neighbor I needed. Left alone, I began unpacking. The process was strangely pleasant. For the first time in many years, I was deciding for myself where and what to put, how to organize the space. No one criticized my decisions. No one rolled their eyes. No one rearranged things the best way. By evening, the main thing was done. I arranged the few dishes in the kitchen, hung clothes in the closet, arranged books on the shelves. On the bedside table, I put Eleanor's picture in a simple wooden frame. The only piece of jewelry I brought with me. Their refrigerator was empty, so I decided to walk to the nearest store. The neighborhood was unfamiliar to me, and I studied the surroundings with interest. A small supermarket was a couple blocks away, and I bought the essentials: bread, milk, eggs, some fruits, and vegetables. On my way back, I noticed Asmal Pizza Place on the corner. I decided I deserved a little celebration today, so I bought a pepperoni pizza and a bottle of beer. By the time I got back to the apartment, it was getting dark. I turned on the lights, set the grocery bags on the kitchen table, and looked around. The small but cozy apartment now looked lived in, mine. I opened the pizza box, poured a beer into a glass, and sat in the chair by the window. From the street came the muffled sounds of the evening city, the noise of passing cars, someone's voices, a dog barking, the usual sounds of ordinary life. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I could just sit and enjoy the moment without fear that someone would come in without knocking, disturb my privacy, start a conversation I didn't want to be a part of. I thought about Laura and Percy. How are they now? Settling into their new home, still angry with me, debating how I could have done this to them. Or perhaps they too were strangely relieved to be starting a new chapter of life. I felt no triumph or gloating at having made them move out. Only a quiet satisfaction of justice restored and control over my own life regained. Perhaps someday our relationship with our daughter will change. Perhaps we'd be able to communicate as equals, as adults who respected each other's boundaries. But right now, it was too soon for that. There were too many resentments, too many misunderstandings. I finished my beer and put away the rest of my dinner. Walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the city, my new home, my new life. At 67, I was starting with a clean slate. It was a little scary, but mostly exciting. For the first time in a long time, I felt really alive, able to make decisions. and take responsibility for them. Not an old man waiting to end up in a closet-sized room, but a full-fledged individual with the right to his own space and respect. I took a shower and went to bed. The unfamiliar silence around me, the lack of familiar sounds of home, it all made him feel strangely like I was in a hotel instead of my own home. But it was only temporary. Soon I would get used to it, and this apartment would become as familiar to me as home had once been. Before I went to bed, I looked at Telenor's picture. "There, Ellie," I said quietly. "I've done it. Started a new life. Do you think I can do it?" Of course, the picture didn't answer. But somehow, I felt that Eleanor would approve of my decision. She'd always believed in me more than I believed in myself. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first full day of my new life, and I was ready for it. The morning greeted me with sunlight streaming through the unfamiliar curtains. For the first few seconds, I couldn't realize where I was. I was too used to waking up in my little room in the old house. But the memories came back and I smiled. I got up, made coffee on the new stove, made toast with jam. I ate breakfast on the balcony, looking out at the waking city. The air was fresh, feminine, promising. The doorbell rang. It was Martha, my landlady, coming to see how I was settling in, if everything was all right. We talked for a while, and she invited me to tea in the next few days. Just a neighborly way of getting to know each other better. After she left, I continued to organize the apartment. I hung the clock on the wall, arranged the books in a more convenient order, put the tools in the drawer I had set aside for them. In the middle of the afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I decided to answer it. "Hello, Dad, it's me." Laura's voice sounded strained. "How are you?" "Good," I answered, surprised by her call. "And how are you settling in?" "I'm fine," she said quietly. "The house is small, but it's okay. Percy says we can get an addition eventually. That's good." Silence again. "I'm calling to say we forgot a few things," she went in at last. "A box of photo albums and a few other little things. They were left in the garage." "I didn't see anything," I replied, "but the new owners don't move on until tomorrow. Maybe you'll still have time to pick up the stuff." "Yeah, I guess so," she sighed. "I just wanted to warn you not to worry if you saw us there." "Of course," I said. "It's your stuff. You have the right to take it." There was a pause again, a longer one. "Dad," her voice got quieter, "are you really okay? Are you doing okay on your own?" There was something like genuine concern in her tone, but I wasn't sure. Too many times in recent years, her ostensible concern had turned out to be just a way of controlling me. "Yes, Lavra," I answered firmly. "I'm absolutely fine. I have a nice apartment, everything I need, and I'm doing just fine on my own." "Good," she said, as if she didn't know what else to say. "Well, then I'll see you later." "I'll see you later," I agreed. After the call, I sat for a while thinking. Was this call the first step to reconciliation or just an excuse to see if I regretted my decision? It was hard to say, but I didn't feel the need to tonalize every word and intonation as I had done before. I had my own life now, and I wasn't going to let other people's moods and intentions determine my state of mind. I spent the rest of the day exploring the neighborhood. One found a small library 2 blocks away, a cozy cave where I could get coffee and read the newspaper, a park with a pond where ducks swam. Ordinary simple things, but they filled me with quiet joy. I was discovering a new world, my world. In the evening, sitting in an armchair with a book and a cup of tea, I caught myself thinking that I felt nostalgia for the old house. No longing for the big rooms, for the garden, for all those things that once seemed so important. My new apartment was much smaller, simpler, without history or memories. But it was my fortress, a place where I could be myself without fear of judgment or neglect. I felt neither triumph nor any particular joy at what had happened, only a quiet satisfaction at the decision I had made, and a quiet relief at the absence of the constant tension that had become habitual in recent years. Life went on without grandiose plans and ambitions, without dramatic turns and epiphes, just the life of an ordinary man who had finally gained control over his destiny and learned to appreciate the simple joys of everyday life. And that perhaps was the main victory. Thanks for watching.